I can't believe I'm saying this, but why would 11 languages and one genius general destroy an entire empire in 1914? It shock you to learn that fighting a war with a political nightmare is difficult. But imagine this. You are an officer who can't speak the language of 70% of your men. You're not just fighting the Russians, you're fighting your own administrative chaos. You are standing at the precipice of a new century, but your boots are firmly stuck in the mud of the 19th. This is the story of Austria-Hungary, the Danubian dinosaur of the West, an empire on life support that was arguably closer to flatlining than even the Ottomans. Before we continue, if you are new here, hit the like, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell and comment what your strategy would have been. You look at the map and see a massive, multi-ethnic polity, but underneath that grand exterior, the gears are grinding against one another. You are part of a world where history is a stained glass window, designed to look magnificent and affirm your legitimacy, but held together by thin lead strips and incredibly easy to shatter. You are a demographic jigsaw puzzle that is about to be violently shaken. You are Franz Joseph, an emperor who has held the throne so long that your subjects see you as an eternal fixture, like the mountains of the Tyrol. You have ruled since 1848, a time before the American Civil War, before the unification of Germany, and before the invention of the telephone. Your face is on every coin, your side whiskers are a symbol of stability, but the state you lead isn't actually one empire. It won't shock you to learn it's two distinct states in a personal union, Austria and Hungary, sharing only a monarch, foreign policy, and the military. This is the Ausgleich of 1867, a compromise born of weakness. You are essentially the CEO of two different companies that hate each other, but are forced to use the same HR department. This means you are constantly dealing with political gridlock that makes the British rotten boroughs look like a streamlined democracy. In Vienna, the parliament is a cacophony of obstructionism. When the Czechs don't get their way, they blow penny whistles and throw inkwells at the Speaker of the House. In Budapest, the Hungarian elite are obsessed with Magyarization, trying to force their language and culture on millions of Slovaks, Romanians, and Croats who want nothing to do with it. In this administrative fever dream, you find yourself commanding not one army, but three. There is the Landwehr for the Austrian half, the Honved for the Hungarian half, each acting as a glorified National Guard, and the KUK Armee, the Common Army. You'd think centralized control would be used to build a war machine, but fun fact, no. The Hungarians, terrified of a centralized army that could be used to suppress their own autonomy, repeatedly use their veto to starve the military of funds. They treat every budget meeting like a hostage negotiation. You want new Krupp artillery? The Hungarians want more linguistic concessions for their officers. You want to modernize the railway for mobilization? The Hungarians want a separate national bank. While the rest of Europe is entering an industrial arms race, your generals are counting pennies. Because of this, your empire enters the Great War spending significantly less on its military per capita than any other great power. You are effectively an underdog who is about to become a hot dog in a way you definitely didn't plan for. If you're enjoying this dive into imperial chaos, hit the like button so the algorithm knows you want more history POV. You stand before your regiment in 1914, ready to deliver a speech that will ignite a thirst for justice for the Archduke. You open your mouth to bark a command in German, and you are met with blank stares. You realize that in a war of modern artillery and split-second timing, only 27% of your soldiers speak German. Another 22% speak Hungarian. But the rest? You've got Czechs, Poles, Ukrainians, Serbs, Romanians, Italians, and Slovenes. Unlike other armies that might group men by language, like the British regimental system or the German regional corps, your empire groups them by where they live to prevent ethnic nationalism from taking root. This means languages are totally dispersed in the ranks. You, as an officer, were technically required to learn the regimental language, the tongue of the majority of your men. But it won't surprise you to learn that many aristocratic officers considered these languages beneath them and never bothered. When the meat grinder starts, communication becomes impossible. Imagine trying to coordinate a bayonet charge when your sergeant speaks Polish, your scouts speak Ruthenian, and your artillery support speaks Magyar. You try to teach your men 80 basic German commands, the Dienstsprache, words like fire, retreat, or attention. But with high illiteracy rates among the peasant conscripts, it's a total disaster. The language of command is a fragile bridge over a canyon of misunderstanding. When the experienced, multilingual professional officers are wiped out in the blood-soaked battles of the first 3 months, their replacements are 90-day wonders from the cities who have zero time to learn the lingo. Your army becomes a giant game of telephone where the message starts as "attack the flank" and ends as "every man for himself." While the Russians are charging at you with a single-minded pan-Slavic purpose, your army is basically 11 different sets of instructions written in 11 different languages, being read by people who can't read. You need a mastermind, and you get Count Franz Conrad von Hötzendorf. Imagine you are Conrad. Oops, actually, just look at him. He is a man of big ideas and even bigger delusions. While other generals are studying the devastating power of the machine gun, Conrad is writing multi-volume treatises on the spirit of the offensive. He is a firm believer in the cult of the offensive. You think that if soldiers are on the defensive, they get lazy, so you want them attacking 100% of the time, regardless of whether they have bullets, food, or winter coats. Conrad is a man who won't let small details like weather or the impassable terrain of the Carpathian Mountains get in the way of his brilliant maneuvers. He draws massive arrows on his maps that look like a toddler played with a Sharpie. He demands that your troops tolerate catastrophic losses while maintaining unshakable morale. When his plans fail, which they do constantly, he doesn't blame his lack of strategy. He blames his incompetent underlings and the unreliability of his Slavic troops. Your German allies, particularly General Erich von Falkenhayn, who actually know how to win a battle, consider him an inept moron. But Conrad doesn't care. He has a personal reason for wanting a quick victory. He is desperately in love with a married woman, Gina von Reininghaus, and he believes that if he becomes a war hero, he can somehow convince the Pope to grant her a divorce so they can be together. Yes, you read that right. The fate of 50 million people and the entire balance of power in Europe is being gambled because a 60-year-old man has a crush. Conrad decides the best move is to launch 2 simultaneous all-out offensives against both Serbia and Russia. This is despite the fact that your army hasn't fought a major war since 1866, when Prussia kicked your ass so hard it forced the creation of the dual monarchy just to survive. While Russia and Serbia have been battle-hardened in recent conflicts like the Balkan Wars, you are like a young piece of hot Roman meat who hasn't stepped onto a football field in 50 years and is now trying to play against the NFL champions. You are obsessed with Serbia. The primary goal of your politicians is the complete crushing of Belgrade, which is hilariously only a 15-minute walk from the border. You devote twice as many soldiers to the Serbian front as the Russian one, expecting a hot diggity dog victory in days. You envision a parade through the streets of Belgrade by the end of August. Instead, the Serbs, who are up to their ears in spunk and have spent the last decade fighting for their lives, completely humiliate your forces. They lure you into the mountains, wait for your supply lines to overextend, and then tear you apart. By the end of 1914, you've lost 500,000 men to a country a fraction of your size. You have been kicked out of Serbia not once, but twice. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Russians are chewing through your regular, trained professional soldiers in the province of Galicia. This is the Galician trap. Conrad's complex maneuvers require his troops to march 20 miles a day in the mud, only to arrive at the battlefield exhausted and without artillery support. You are sending Polish and Ukrainian conscripts to fight their own ideological brothers in the Russian army, and it won't shock you to learn that morale is dropping through the floor. Entire regiments are surrendering just to get a warm meal from the Russians. By the time the first winter hits, the Austro-Hungarian army has effectively ceased to exist as an independent fighting force. You have lost the core of your professional NCOs and officers, the only people who actually knew how to speak multiple languages. From this point on, you are a zombie army, kept upright only by the sheer will of the Germans. If you thought the summer was bad, wait until you experience the winter of 1915. Conrad, in his infinite genius, decides to launch a winter offensive in the Carpathian Mountains to relieve the besieged fortress of Przemysl. Imagine you are a soldier in this nightmare. You have no winter boots, your coat is made of ersatz, substitute material, that soaks up water like a sponge. You are ordered to charge uphill through waist-deep snow against Russian machine guns. The temperature drops to 30 degrees. Men aren't just dying from bullets. They are literally freezing to death in their sleep. Rifles are jamming because the oil has frozen solid. This is the winter of the Carpathians, and it is one of the most forgotten horrors of the 20th century. You lose another 800,000 men in 3 months. For context, that is more than the total American deaths in all of World War II, lost in a single mountain range for a fortress that eventually surrendered anyway. By mid-1915, your army is so degraded that Germany has to bail you out constantly just to prevent a total collapse. This is the iron ring of German support. You are no longer a great power, you are a junior partner, or more accurately, a satellite state, in a war you started but cannot finish. Your generals are now taking orders from Berlin, and your soldiers are being stiffened by German interstitial units. Basically, German companies placed between Austro-Hungarian ones to make sure they don't run away. History is a stained glass window, and the window of Austria-Hungary was shattered from the day it was made. You tried to run a 20th century war using a medieval administrative system where rotten boroughs of political interest dictated military strategy. You ignored the life support alarms and walked straight into a blizzard without a tent. Inside the empire, the home front is collapsing because the military took all the horses and most of the farmers. Food production has plummeted. In Vienna, people are eating sawdust in their bread and lining up for hours for a single turnip. The stained glass isn't just cracked, the lead strips are melting. Nationalists in Prague, Zagreb, and Krakow realize that the eternal emperor is dying, and with him, the dream of a multi-ethnic Central Europe. Your empire's collapse in 1918 wasn't just a military defeat, it was the inevitable conclusion of a political nightmare that finally woke up to a cold, hard, and bloody reality. Justice for the Archduke had turned into the death of an entire imperial order. When Franz Joseph finally dies in 1916, the last glue holding the puzzle together disappears. His successor, Karl the Muir, tries to make peace, but it's too late. The gears have ground themselves into dust. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button so you don't miss our next deep dive into the messy reality of the past. Here we deep dive into the secret police of the Habsburgs and the strange life of the last empress. So hit that subscribe not to miss out. This is the History from Your POV channel, and we will catch you on the next one.